This is India Global. I'm Gaurie, Dwivedi. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's start the show with headlines this Monday evening. First up, US hits Russian oil with fresh and toughest sanctions yet. The sanctions are likely to disrupt oil supply to top buyers of Russian oil. That includes China and India. India-Bangladesh border fencing row escalates. India summons top Bangladesh diplomat in a tit-for-tat move. Breakthrough possible in the Gaza truce talks. Reports suggest that a final draft of Gaza truce deal is being presented to stakeholders, and the breakthrough is a day after Biden dials Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's a bumper Apple crop. India's iPhone exports crossed the 1 lakh crore rupee mark in a huge boost to Prime Minister Modi's PLI scheme. And the Mahakumbh kicks off in India's Prayagraj. The world's biggest, largest religious festival begins with all its color, grandness in full display. All right, our top story this Monday evening is, the fresh sanctions that US President Joe Biden seems to have imposed on his way out. 10 days before he demits office, he has imposed Washington's harshest set of sanctions on Russian oil entities. Sanctioned 2 major Russian entities and roughly 183 oil tankers, a move that could hurt both China as well as India. These are the largest buyers of Russian oil since the Ukraine-Russia conflict started almost 3 years back. The Chinese and Indian oil refiners are likely to now seek alternative source of crude from the Middle East, Africa and other areas, which of course is likely to lead to a surge in oil prices. There will be higher freight costs and of course the prices of crude will be higher, which is why probably it's responding. The markets seem to be responding to this news, with oil prices surging to $81 a barrel as markets reacted to the looming potential for supply disruptions. Even as the rupee, the Indian rupee, fell to an all-time low of 86 against the US dollar. Now, why is this significant? This is significant because India imports over 80% of its oil needs. So we import and pay in dollar terms. So if the rupee becomes is getting depreciated, it means that for the same amount of crude oil that we import, we've got to pay more in our Indian currency, which is why it's sort of a double whammy for us. On one end, there could be some sort of a disruption in terms of supply lines, making it more expensive. And on the other end, because the Indian rupee is depreciating, it will cost us that much more. And that's why we are asking our big questions this evening first, as far as what this means for India. The first question that we are asking is, will India bear the brunt of Russian sanctions? Remember, over 30% of India's oil needs are now being met by Russian oil. Now, how will we get impacted is the first question that we are asking today. The second key question is, what will be the next alternatives that India has? Remember, a couple of years before the Iranian sanctions came into play, Iran actually contributed very large amount for our supply. That is not an option now. If Russia's oil is also not an option, then what is our option? That's the second key question that we are asking. And the third important is, how will the falling rupee have an impact in terms of the overall amount of money that India will have to pay? And that's the question that I'll put to both the guests joining me today. And Professor Anuradha Chinoy, who's she's joining, and she's from JNU, and I have Dr. Asif Iqbal, from a foreign trade expert as well. Thank you so much for joining me on what I feel is not just a foreign policy or an economic issue, but it's a long-term geopolitical, geo-economic issue that we need to discuss. And Dr. Asif, let me start by asking you, and then I get in Professor Anuradha as well, which is that how do you read the present situation unfolding for India? Do you see the possibility of maneuvering the present sanctions as we've been able to do so far? Or do you think now the sanctions are very widespread, very deep, and escaping them would probably be, or being able to find loopholes would be more difficult for India going forward?
Thank you. Well, I feel that this is there's a big challenge for both India and China now that we will be looking at importing most of the Indian refiners now will start looking at Africa, the Middle East, and they'll be sourcing more oil from these regions, including the United States. Therefore, the price will be boosted, and the freight costs also. Because I believe that the supplies to Moscow's top customers are going to be affected using this. And I believe that out of 520 barrels, 520 shipments, 300 have come to India and the rest have gone to China out of 530 million barrels. And I believe that this is going to be a very big challenge, and we have to see how it uncovers in the next few days by India trying to sign and make some new arrangements with the Middle East and with the African nations.
Okay, Professor Anuradha, then let me ask you this. How do you see this situation unfolding? The fact that these sanctions, some of them have been in place the last 3 years. There have been EU sanctions, there have been UK sanctions, and of course the most widespread being US. But the top-ups that came over the weekend, they seem to be widespread. Do you see that having a major impact on India, or do you see there are opportunities for India to be able to find India-specific solutions, so to say?
Well, look, so far, India had negotiated with the United States that they could bypass those secondary sanctions, CATSA, which the sanctions are being imposed on Russia, but not on India's imports. So that's how India had bypassed. And just last year, Indian imports of oil from Russia, crude oil, went up by 4.5%. So India will have to see and pressurize the US to allow them these exemptions. They've also sanctioned the shipping fleets. That means insurance, etc. So it's a complicated set of sanctions. It's very wrong of Biden in his last week as lame duck president to have imposed this. But the whole purpose is to push US oil. Now, US is a major producer of oil, and that they want to push that to Europe. And India was getting this crude, refining it, putting it into the whole barrel, and then re-exporting it to Europe. That's how India was working. So India will have to, as it is, they get 36%. So 73% was from other sources. And I think the US is putting pressure that we should buy American oil, which will be much more expensive.
Professor Anuradha, which brings me to ask you that if the purpose and the primary goal is to push US oil, US is a large exporter, large manufacturer when it comes to crude oil, the fact that if that is the ultimate goal of this policy, it's unlikely that Trump 2.0 will reverse any of it, because that's what the premise of his entire campaign so far has been, hasn't it?
Correct. But the other thing is that India was buying Russian oil with Indian rupees. So as you mentioned, that the Indian rupee versus the dollar, it has gone up. It's volatile. So India was, gaining even from that we were being able to get Russian oil for Indian rupees. And so I think India is very specifically being targeted, and these tariffs are going to be increasing. But India will have to be firm, tough, and negotiate of how they can bypass this and continue this trade on oil in Indian rupees, because India had gained a lot, and India is a major oil importer. Because there is going to be a tough stance even from Trump, because
Absolutely.
he's going to push this in order to gain leverage on Russia.
Absolutely,
if he has
this
any
is
talks.
leverage, and he would like to have that leverage not just on Russia, but possibly on India as well. But Dr. Asif, then do you share Professor Anuradha's opinion, what she said, that India at some level is being targeted here? And what do you see could be the possible options, if at all there are any on the table?
Well, I think India is going to be having to renegotiate more like a preferential kind of a sanction, so that it does not completely affect only the oil trade. Because initially, when the United States wanted to impose the sanctions, it was focused more towards the, the binary usage of the items that were used for the war, like semiconductors. There was a high priority list that they had, compiled and said the sanctions would be only against them for India. I mean, and we had abided by that semiconductors, machine tools, integrated circuits, and all such items that would be used for the war against Ukraine. However, now this whole thing about sanction against the oil, and if you see it, it has touched $80 after touching $81 today, the per barrel price. So it is going to be a lot of interest to the global players who are trading into oil, and I believe that it is going to touch $85 in the next few days.
Okay, that's not a very positive scenario, because $85, if the oil goes, if the rupee has a certain downward pressure right now, it just makes our oil purchase more expensive. Professor Anuradha,
but there's one more thing the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, she wanted to put a cap of $60 per barrel.
Yeah.
So the Russians could negotiate, and instead of buying, right now American oil is $71 a barrel. If they push their prices down and adhere to the cap, then maybe they could do it. But there are a lot of complex negotiations involved in this now for India and for Russia and for the rest.
Which brings me to ask you that as things stand right now, Trump 2.0 presidency starts in just about a week's time. Is there a way to be able to New Delhi's options in terms of being able to reach out to the Trump administration to talk about these sanctions, the kind of impact they could have? Because, this is not just about the oil trade, right? This has a larger messaging there, right? And how can New Delhi sort of reach out to Trump 2.0 and ensure that it doesn't have the impact in terms of the overall relationship?
Yeah, is that to me? Okay,
yeah, that's to you.
Trump, he is a very transactional but somewhat irrational, unpredictable kind of person. But he has, even in his last long interview and press conference, said he wants to end the war between Ukraine and Russia, and that would mean maybe easing some sanctions. So, of course, Russia will push for that. They're also interested, and India doesn't want to be touched with these secondary sanctions. It will be good for all these economies, including the American economies, if they turn down the sanctions to some extent, but they will not do so until they get what they show as a victory, some kind of victory in this war. But
exactly.
I expect, negotiations
exactly.
to start
Dr. Asif, quick closing comments on specifically in terms of options for New Delhi?
Well, now I believe that our stand has to be a little more realigned, because now, especially when our foreign minister goes to the swearing in the next 4 days, I'm sure they are going to be taking a call, and he will have some good news that will be very good to our ears.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking out the time, speaking to me on a very important geo-economic, geopolitical issue as far as crude oil is concerned. Well, viewers, on this issue, bottom line really is that this is not just about oil economics. This is not just about trade. This is about leverage. Leverage that US wants to have on Russia and on the US. As far as this trade for oil is concerned, there will be scope for maneuvering, because guess what? Sanctions don't just depend upon how they are announced. They all depend upon how they are actually implemented. How they are executed is how you judge their efficiency. So there is a fair chance that there could be some opportunities for loopholes for being able to work around these fresh sanctions. But it's the leverage that Donald Trump would really seek, because he's been saying all along he wants to end this war. And the only way he can end this war is through economic leverage that he's seeking. And it's not just on Russia, he's wanting economic leverage on almost the entire world. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side, talk more about, well, the Quad foreign ministers meeting that could be on the sidelines of Donald Trump's inauguration next week. Stay with us. We come back with that story and lots more. Welcome back. You're watching India Global. Let's now turn our attention to the other important story we're tracking on the show. A day after Donald Trump is inaugurated and sworn in as the 47th U.S. president, foreign ministers of the Quad countries, which is Japan, the US, Australia and India, are likely to meet in Washington. As per reports, the Japanese government is arranging for the meeting after Donald Trump's swearing-in ceremony. The meeting is likely to signal the Trump administration's focus on security in the Indo-Pacific region amidst rising influence of China and also strengthen cooperation within the Quad allies. Marco Rubio, who is Trump's pick for Secretary of State, will represent Washington at the meeting, while Foreign Minister Jaishankar, who will be attending President-elect Donald Trump's swearing-in ceremony, will represent India. All right, more news coming in. It seems the world's richest man is eyeing the politics of a new country. This time it is Canada, as beleaguered Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's announcement of resignation as the Prime Minister and head of Liberal Party set in motion a leadership race against the backdrop of a looming general election. Since Trudeau's resignation on Monday, Elon Musk has posted repeatedly about Canadian politics on his platform that he owns, which is X. He has praised clippings of Pierre Poilievre, the head and leader of Canada's Conservative Party, and while relishing in Trudeau's downfall and engaging with right-wing Canadian influencers. This report tells you more about Musk and why he's likely to play an important role in the Canadian election coming up. After weeks of online campaigns targeting various corners of Europe, tech mogul Elon Musk has now trained his sights on Canada. The world's richest man has showered praise on Canadian opposition leader Pierre Poilievre through a series of X posts. Whether it is approving Poilievre's oratory skills,
high taxes, deficits,
or reposting an old video of the politician chiding a local journalist while eating an apple,
Healthcare is a problem,
Musk seems to be cutting no corners in supporting his favorite Canadian politician. So who is Pierre Poilievre, and how come one of the most powerful people on the planet is throwing his weight behind him? Poilievre was born in Calgary, Alberta in 1979. His 16-year-old mother gave him up for adoption, and he was raised by two school teachers in the city's suburbs. He was the youngest member of the House of Commons when he won election at 25 in 2004. He is the leader of the Conservative Party, the main opposition party in Canada. And according to the latest polls, he is favourite to be the next Prime Minister. As the outgoing Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau's approval ratings seem to be touching new lows each month. Musk's support for Poilievre also means he's not mincing words in attacking Justin Trudeau. He has mocked the leader over his resignation, borrowing Donald Trump's language to refer to him as a governor. He's even called Trudeau an insufferable tool. While Poilievre has Musk's attention for now, it would be interesting to see which nation attracts the Tesla CEO next. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report for NDTV World. Okay, moving on, Singapore's President Tharman Shanmugaratnam is all set to visit India this week, in fact, marking a significant milestone in the 60th year of the diplomatic ties between the two countries. The visit is likely to take India and Singapore relations to new heights, with a focus on non-traditional areas of cooperation, which is energy, industrial parks and skills. In fact, skilling is likely to be a major focus for the Singapore leader, who is going to be, in fact, this is going to be the first visit by a Singapore leader in the last 10 years. My colleague Ghazali joins for more on this and why this is a significant step in terms of the bilateral relations between India and Singapore. Go ahead, Ghazali, explain to us, connect the dots.
So, as you rightly pointed out, the first visit by a Singapore president in the last 10 years, and why this visit is very significant, because last year we saw Prime Minister Modi visiting there in Singapore. He said that how India has become a land of opportunities for other countries, and besides the cultural connect, besides the Indian diaspora there in Singapore thriving and contributing towards Singaporean economy, India has also become a big field for Singapore to invest here. So as of now, there are 6 skill centers centers which are running in India in different states when it comes to a joint venture between India and Singapore. So perhaps that kind of agreement will be revisited by both the parties. Besides that, the Singapore's president is also scheduled to visit Odisha, where he will have some talks with the Odisha government there for further sort of cooperation between Odisha and Singapore. And then this visit not only will sort of revise all the existing agreements between India and Singapore when it comes to semiconductor, energy, defense cooperation, but new avenues perhaps in the skilled development sector, which will be something which will be thrust of this visit, because whenever Indian Prime Minister or Indian External Affairs Minister have visited any country in abroad, these two issues are now one of the focus areas. So even now when he visits, the Singapore's president will be visiting India. Energy sector, besides energy, defense and other cooperation in other sectors, the skill development domain will be something which will be in focus, and India and Singapore will be worked towards that. A very important remark also came from one of the cabinet ministers in Singapore's government day before yesterday when he was attending an Indian diaspora event in Singapore. He said that India is a place where we look forward for more opportunities, and how Indian diaspora has also contributed towards the economy in Singapore was well acknowledged by the government there. So it seems so that both countries are working towards a very positive side, and perhaps we will see much more enhanced engagement in different areas of sectors which will be different from what we have already in.
All right, Mohammad Ghazali, appreciate you giving us that lowdown on why this visit is so important. Shifting focus now from Singapore to Sri Lanka. Well, the Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake made his maiden foreign visit to New Delhi to India last month, and he is now set to follow that up by going to China. That's where he is now headed next. Sri Lankan President is set to visit China this week, seeking to balance ties with Beijing weeks after his India visit, a visit that China had termed as being of great importance, Dissanayake, who began his political career as an anti-India voice, has since shifted stances, and while appreciating India's assistance during Sri Lanka's grave economic crisis 2 years back, chose India for his first visit abroad. All right, Apple has reportedly achieved a major milestone by surpassing the 1 lakh crore rupee mark for iPhone exports from India in 2024, with exports hitting a record $12.8 billion, which is a little under 1.1 lakh crore rupees, reflecting a 42% year-on-year increase. This growth largely stems from a rise in local value addition, now ranging between 15 to 20%, depending on the model, and a nearly 46% surge in domestic production, which totaled about $17.5 billion. The $12.8 billion in exports this year marks an unprecedented achievement for any single product export from India, and highlights the success of the PLI scheme, the production-linked incentive scheme that was launched 2 years back when it comes to smartphones. All right, with that, we're slipping into a very short break. We come back on the other side, talk more about the India-Bangladesh fencing face-off and where does it go from here. Stay with us, we talk about that and lots more. Watching India Global, we now turn our attention to the other big story of the show. In a tit-for-tat move, the Indian Foreign Ministry today summoned Nural Islam, Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh, to India to discuss the escalating tensions between New Delhi and Dhaka. This comes after the Bangladeshi Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Indian High Commissioner Pranay Verma following allegations that India was attempting to construct fences at 5 specific locations along the over 4,100-kilometer Indo-Bangladesh border. Listen in first to what the Indian Army Chief General Dwivedi had to say on this entire issue. We come back and talk more about its ramifications.
Bangladesh is strategically important to us. We are the neighbors, we have to live together, understand each other, and any kind of animosity is not in each other's interest. As of today, firstly, there is no vulnerability from any side. I am in touch with the Chief of Bangladesh during the time of when this changeover took place. I was in constant touch with him, And even thereafter, in November 24, we had a video conference also. As far as the military cooperation is concerned, is again going up in the same way.
All right, let's get in Mohammad Ghazali to talk to us and really explain what this entire face-off is all about. Yesterday, our High Commissioner was summoned by Bangladesh. Today, we have summoned the Deputy High Commissioner, because who is the highest ranking official here in India from Bangladesh's side. He has been summoned. Talk to us about what really this row is all about. How is it escalated to become a diplomatic issue between the two countries?
See, Gaurie, in the last few weeks, there have reports which have emerged from Bengal, from other from other states in India, which share the land border with Bangladesh, and there have been reports that how infiltration attempts have been made from the Bangladeshi infiltrators, and Indian border security forces have tried to thwart that, to stop it. And that is when there have been reports of skirmishes from the Bangladeshi people, between Bangladeshi people and the BSF forces, and that is what the Bangladeshi government has been objecting to. What they say is that India is trying to erect fences or 5 checkpoints at 5 different locations across the land border, and that is what Bangladesh believes is against the land agreement between the two countries. And that is why yesterday Pranay Verma, the Indian High Commissioner in Dhaka, was summoned. He was also conveyed by the Bangladeshi Foreign Secretary that India should not be escalating the situation near the border, because one Bangladeshi citizen have been reportedly killed in a crossfire between BSF and the infiltrators. So whether the person who was killed in that shootout was a Bangladeshi citizen is confirmed, but whether he was an infiltrator or not, there has been no confirmation or a word from the Bangladeshi side about it. And that is why, as you rightly pointed out, in a bit to de-escalate the situation, that is why the Indian Foreign Ministry today invited or sort of summoned the Bangladeshi Deputy High Commissioner, Mr. Nural Islam, to convey that India is not in any ways trying to escalate the situation. Rather, India is in favor of sort of toning down whatever the tensions been going around between the two countries. That is why Foreign Secretary Mr. Vikram Misri visited Bangladesh last year there and met Mr. Yunus, spoke about the atrocities against the minorities. And both sides have acknowledged the fact that despite these ongoing stress between the two countries, ongoing tension over the issue of atrocities against the minorities or the ISKCON priest Mr. Chinmoy Das, the usual business, the usual diplomatic activities between both the countries should continue. And this exercise of summoning the Indian High Commissioner there in Dhaka, or India summoning the Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh in New Delhi today, is part of that larger exercise, which doesn't show that the relations between the two countries are very strained, because the trade is going on between the two countries as usual, and both India and Bangladesh have hinted it, we can confirm so, that the relations will be moving towards a positive side. They want to continue with the healthy relations, but meanwhile India has also stressed the fact that they also want Bangladesh to address these key issues which impacts India as well.
Exactly. All right, Mohammad Ghazali, appreciate you taking out the time to tell us more on that issue. Let's now get in Ashok Sajjanar, former diplomat, on this issue. But before that, let's quickly tell our viewers the key questions that we are putting forth in this fencing face-off, as we call it, with regard to India-Bangladesh ties. The first key question that we are asking today on the show is that will fencing row escalate into a full-blown diplomatic crisis? The reason why I ask this is because the relationship between the two countries is at a very delicate moment, and one single issue could become a major crisis. Is that fencing face-off likely to be reaching that? That's a question I'm going to pose to the panelists. The second key question is, will border agencies DG level talks try and ease tensions? Remember, there is the BSF and there is the border Bangladesh border force. Will the two of them, the DG level talks, try and address some of these tensions and ensure that calm prevails and the situation doesn't escalate further? That's the second key question. The third important question that I'll be putting to the panelists is, what's really behind the objection? What's really the whole issue all about? What is the 1970 accord, the 1974 accord that Bangladesh has been citing again and again, by which it says you cannot go about citing, why you cannot go about fencing the border? Why is it that the BSF says that we are well within our rights to do so? What's this whole issue really all about? Let's get in Ambassador Sajjanar as well as Major Karim to be really decoding these two things for us. Gentlemen, thanks much for taking out the time, joining me on India Global. Ambassador Sajjanar, let me start with you, sir. The relationship between India and Bangladesh is at a delicate moment, and the fencing issue is clearly becoming a crisis right now for both sides. There is a lack of goodwill, there's a lack of trust. How do you see this particular issue now being resolved between the two sides?
I think the issue has to be resolved through dialogue, through talks, and it has to be resolved through maturity. I think what Bangladesh needs to realize is that, much of the border between India and Bangladesh, it is about more than 4,400 kilometers. Much of that has already been fenced, and there are certain portions that have not been fenced so far. So it is not as if this fencing is taking place all of a sudden. There has been an agreement between the two sides. In any case, the fencing is taking place on the Indian side. So I don't think that there is any cause for Bangladesh to, to raise this issue. The second aspect is that I think Bangladesh needs to realize India has been following its approach in a very calibrated manner. It doesn't want to provoke the issue. It doesn't want to escalate the matter. And that is why your correspondent Gaurie also said that our foreign secretary had gone there, met Dr. Mohammed Yunus, and made it very clear that India wants positive, friendly, warm, cooperative, collaborative, cordial relations with Bangladesh. And India is not doing anything of to provoke Bangladesh in any
Absolutely.
manner. For Bangladesh to summon the Indian High Commissioner
it's
and
a
make
very,
this
very
out
strong
in public,
step. It's a very strong step.
I think it's a very strong step. It is playing to the domestic audience. I think that is what the matter is.
Hold your thought there, sir. Hold your thought. Let me ask that to Major Razaul Karim. That is this about posturing to the domestic constituency, essentially? Given the mood that Bangladesh is in right now, is this what the government is doing?
Thank you. Actually, from India perspective, you might be right. I will not say you are wrong. But from Bangladesh perspective, if you think, the one, actually, sir, the one he was telling that the realization from Bangladesh end, at the side by side, yes, I do agree. Bangladesh should realize something, some matters. Again, India should also realize some matters. And about about the agreement, yes, there are some agreement between Bangladesh and Indian government, but that is during the previous regime. Now, let me give you a little bit background. Basically, I will not blame India for their any role right now, because so long the way our previous government, especially Awami regime, had been ignoring everything just to appease Indian, the then current or the current government. Thereby, the expectation for India from Bangladesh supposed to be very high. That might be right or wrong, might
Major
be
Karim.
good or bad for Bangladesh, but accordingly, why India should deny if they get something better from them? So the previous government, they had been giving everything,
Major
but
Karim,
they had not been.
I am giving you all time, and I'm going to give you all time. But I am asking you one question.
Yes.
That you are saying it's Awami government, previous government, but
Yes.
agreements are signed between sovereign governments, right? Whoever's government
Yes.
it would be. What
Yes,
does
but
it?
that
Let me
government-
ask my
but the
question, sir.
current government-
Let me ask
current
my question,
government-
sir.
current government,
I am
we
asking
don't-
you a question, sir, which
But
is
we
that
don't-
when
we
sovereign
don't
governments,
approve that.
sir, let me ask the question.
Yes.
Sovereign governments sign pacts so that irrespective of whichever government comes to power, the agreement has to pass the test of time, right? That's how all agreements, all pacts
You need to know-
around
you
the
know
world
that-
are signed
you need
by
to know-
all governments. If we go back
Please
on
note my
that,
point.
then
Please
the
note my point.
premise of having any sovereign government sign any agreement gets lost. That is my
You are
question
putting
to you.
questions, but you are not taking my answer.
No, I'm asking. Now my question
No,
is finished.
then
I give
need
you
to
all
take
the
my
time,
answer.
sir.
You need to take my answer.
Yeah.
So why this revolution took place? The 5th August revolution, why it took place? You need to get answer. Because the previous government, they were illegal. They were not rightly elected government. They were not accepted by the Bangladeshi common population. And thereby they had been ousted from the power. And now, why we are seeking for certain changes, border area and also domestic area. And all the way, we are bringing certain changes. Why? Because whatever was
You have
done by
spoken,
the
sir?
previous government, most of them were not the common interest
Okay.
for the Bangladesh,
Okay.
Bangladeshi people or the national interest for the
I'll
Bangladesh.
say one thing, sir. I gave you time. I gave
Yes.
you enough time to respond. Let me now get an
Yes.
Ambassador Sajjanhar on this, which is that I'm not going to go back into the fact that, what was Awami League all about, because, it's very easy to say, and for an unelected government to talk about the previous elected government about its goods and bads.
No, this is
Right.
not. No, you cannot say this is unelected. This is not
It's an
unelected
elected
because there,
government.
there
As I
was no
said,
election.
that's not the topic of discussion today. Mohammed Yunus is an unelected leader, sir. This is not the topic of discussion
the
today.
Unelected word is not justified here because
Okay.
there was
as
no
I
election.
As I said, that's not the topic of discussion. Ambassador
is a
Sajjanhar
demanding
respond
government.
to the fact that every time a new government comes, the previous government's pacts are then, considered null and void. Then how do we go about ensuring that
This
diplomatic
government cannot be
ties?
compared with the previous
Sir, now
government.
you are speaking over me. I gave you enough time. Let's now give Ambassador Sajjanhar some time. He has been very patiently listening. I am asking him about how to resolve a situation like this, where previous pacts are all considered null and void because, well, a revolution has happened, new sets of people have come to power.
Gaurie, international relations never work that way. International relations, as you very rightly pointed out, are signed between sovereign governments, plenipotentiary governments, and of course, whatever agreements are signed, they are valid for the forthcoming governments also. I think you also made another very, powerful, strong point, and that is that the former government was elected democratically. Now, is the gentleman is Major Rahim? Is he challenging all the elections that have taken place, the last three elections? In fact, the present government, you said very rightly, it's not elected. It is a caretaker government. It is an interim government for which there is no provision in the Bangladesh constitution. So it is an extra constitutional dispensation. It is not even a government of that nature. So I think for them to say the mandate, basically what had been given to Dr. Mohammed Yunus was to come maintain peace, security, stability, as far stabilize the economy and hold elections, so
Right.
that a duly elected government can take action on whatever might be
Okay.
the challenges.
Ambassador Sajjanhar?
The second point, the last point,
Yes.
Gaurie, if
I
you
have a
permit
question
just
to
one
Ambassador.
sentence, that India's neighborhood first policy is a non-reciprocal policy where we are more generous to our neighbors.
Exactly.
It is not,
Exactly.
these actions
Exactly.
are not in our favor.
Exactly. Okay, I'm running out of time, but in the spirit of fairness, Major Karim, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. In the spirit of fairness, you can make your point quickly, sir.
Yeah, actually, the one ambassador was saying that for any national interest, there is no provision, there is no as such written word in constitution that for the national security, national interest, you need to have an elected government. The current government, the interim government, they are very much they have very much relevance, very much constitutional rights.
Major Karim, this was not
speak
even
for
the
national
topic, sir.
interest to
The
go for
topic was
any
about
legal action.
fencing. You are going on and on and on about defending Mr. Yunus and
No,
whether
I'm
he is
not
elected or
defending.
unelected.
I'm telling the fact.
We were talking
You are
about
putting
fencing.
something on my
Not
mouth
one word have
and
you said
you
about
speak out
fencing
as
so
per
far.
your desire.
Not one word have you said that this was about that 1.2 kilometer area over which there's been so much of a hue and cry.
That
Not
was,
one
that
word
was
have you
the-
said about why
that was
you think
our
Bangladesh
area.
border is
That was our area. That was given by Sheikh
You're going
Hasina.
on and on
That
and
was
on
not your
justifying
area.
Mohammed Yunus.
That was
He
given
says
by
elections, but he never gives
we
a
have
time frame.
taken
As
our
I said,
land back.
I gave you more than what I thought time. I've been very
no,
fair to you.
no.
In fact, it's
You
Ambassador
want me
Sajjanhar
to
who wanted to
speak
make
for
points
you.
and I haven't given him time. But thank you so much, gentlemen,
Thank
for
you.
joining me on India Global today. As far as this issue is concerned, viewers, the bottom line is that there are three important things that need to be kept in mind. Point number one, that when sovereign governments sign pacts, they need to pass the test of time. Every time there is an issue, Mohammed Yunus's government cannot say this was done by the Sheikh Hasina government and hence we do not consider it fair and can revoke it. That cannot happen for every issue. The other key point with regard to fencing is that this is regarding a small 1.2 kilometer area where there is going back and forth. Dialogue is the only way to resolve this. And the third and the important point is that India has been very vocal about its concerns regarding smuggling, crime and all such matters when it comes to the porous India-Bangladesh border. Why should it not be allowed to fence it in its own interests is the key question that we are not yet finding an answer to from the Bangladeshi side. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side. Stay with us. Lots more stories on the other side. This is India Global. We now turn our attention to some of the other important stories coming in. First up, some reports seem to suggest, as per some Israeli officials, that Israel has submitted the final proposal to Hamas for a deal for ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and release of hostages that are held by the terrorists since the 7th of October 2023. This comes as negotiators are racing against time to secure a deal before President Joe Biden leaves office and President-elect Donald Trump's tenure begins on 20th of January. For over a year, Israel and Hamas have been engaged in indirect talks that have been mediated by Egypt as well as Qatar and facilitated by the United States. On Sunday, Biden spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, stressing on the immediate need of reaching a deal. While outgoing NSA Jake Sullivan said the deal was very, very close and yet far. All right, shifting now attention to the Russia-Ukraine war, where a day after Ukrainian President Zelensky revealed that Kiev has captured 2 North Korean soldiers in Russia's Kursk region, the first time Ukraine has announced the capture of North Korean soldiers alive since their entry into the war last autumn. Zelensky has said that Kiev is ready to hand over North Korean soldiers to their leader Kim Jong-un if he can organize their exchange for Ukrainians that have been held captive in Russia since this war began. Turning our attention to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who has said that people responsible for the violence during the Capitol should not be pardoned, as President-elect Donald Trump is promising to use his power to pardon those who tried on 6th of January 2021 to overturn the results of the election that Donald Trump had lost. More than 1,500 people have been charged with federal crimes stemming from the siege that left more than 100 police officers injured, sent lawmakers into hiding as they met to certify Democrat Joe Biden's 2020 victory over Donald Trump. All right, we now turn our attention to the 45-day-long Grand Maha Kumbh that has begun from today. It's considered to be the world's largest spiritual gathering. It's Posh Purnima today, and millions of devotees have gathered from today itself for the holy dip. Today is when the first dip was taken place. The Mahakumbh is held once every 12 years, and this is in fact considered to be once, that is after 144 years. It is such an auspicious time, and millions of devotees are expected to visit Prayagraj in Uttar Pradesh over the next 40 days. The city has got a facelift, with walls of the city being adorned with paintings, drawings depicting different aspects of Hinduism in all its glory, in grandeur and color.
Kumbh, which is the largest human congregation on the planet, draws visitors from across the world. And this time around, there's been a special focus to make those visiting India feel more welcome and experience the spirit of the Kumbh. Now, I have with me a group of tourists from Bulgaria. What brings you to the Kumbh?
We are photographers from Bulgaria, and we are very excited to see your rituals and to feel, hopefully, this enlightenment that your saints have achieved. And we are really interested to see this ritual happening in front of our eyes, and we hope to feel some part of it also. And we are curious about your moksha.
And are you planning to take the holy dip? Are you attempting it?
Yes, it's very tempting, but we're not sure yet. Maybe if we have courage enough, we'll maybe try.
Also, because the Kumbh is known for crowds, I think you have a very unique way of locating your group. And if I can show you these, these are the flags to, I guess, identify your groups, right?
Yes, our guides, which are amazing, are leading us to not get lost in the crowd, because we found out that 500 million people are gathering here for 40 days. So we were a little bit afraid if we get lost. But for now, the organization and everything is perfect. And we don't feel lost. We feel safe and really excited about your culture.
And since you said you're photographers, are you happy with what you've been able to capture so far in terms of photographs?
Yes, so we are amazed. Everyone here is so colorful, so expressive, so welcoming, and we are really happy to be here.
Thank you so much for taking time out for NDTV. Please have a lovely trip and enjoy this Kumbh.
Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's the Mahakumbh which is getting millions of devotees, not just those from India, from around the world. And you heard that conversation that Saurav had with those Bulgarian tourists, photographers, devotees, and there are going to be millions of more from around the world. Let's get in Saurav live to talk more about what he's been experiencing so far. It's only day one, Saurav, but talk to us about the experience, the scale, the grandeur, and how it's like to really be in Sangam right now at the Mahakumbh.
Well, you know, it's overwhelming to say the least, because this is frankly the world's largest congregation, and we've had over 1 crore people just today take the holy dip on the first day of the Kumbh. And the Mahakumbh, of course, is only expected to get bigger in size, with more devotees expected tomorrow as the first day of the Shahi Snan takes place. So obviously this is a global event. This is not just, you know, an event that is steeped in history, of course, in tradition, in age-old beliefs that have stood the test of time, but also an event that has adopted modernity, technology, and, you know, this is a global platform now and it's being showcased on a global platform as well by India. Given the fact that there's so many foreign tourists, there's special attention being paid to foreign tourists and their needs. There's a high level of adoption of technology, you know, face recognition cameras, all of that, to make sure that this Kumbh is not just one that's steeped in tradition and, like I said, age-old beliefs, but also one that's more safer for everyone who comes to visit with the adoption of technology. And it's, of course, only going to get bigger with 45 crore people expected by the Kumbh Mela over the next few days.
All right, Saurabh, we're going to keep coming to you over the next 45 days for all the modern and technology that is being put, the infrastructure that is being put. It is the Hindu Dharma and the spiritual beliefs of Hindus that is at the core of Mahakumbh. With that, we're completely timed out in this edition of India Global. Thanks so much for watching.